what's your plan of leveraging personalization based on locality, based on behavior, based on interest?
If you're just starting, you have no baseline, just be open. You've only got upwards to grow. People want to see results within days, within a week. That's not going to happen. Start with one piece of content. I always start with a long form blog. From there, we create carousels, little snippets of stories. We want to track first purchase, third purchase, referrals. What exactly do we want to know? The ICE method, it's impact, confidence, and ease. Impact, will this channel reach my ideal customers? The confidence, do I know how to use it well enough? And ease, can I...
Hey everyone, we have Ferraina. Welcome Sarah on board. Sarah is an incredible marketing coach, consultant, and the founder of Save My Marketing. Sarah has spent over 20 years helping startups, small businesses to take control of their marketing and how to grow sustainability in early phase of their business. She mentors a lot of businesses. She works with a lot of businesses, and she has an extensive experience in B2B and B2C segment over the last 20 years, driving powerful result-driven strategies, especially with businesses who has really tight, small budgets. So I'm really looking forward for some insightful tips, tricks today on how you have managed to bring success and growth for all these small, medium-sized businesses whom we have consulted over the last 20 years. Sarah, welcome on board. Really excited to have you today.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. And can I have you introduce me in that way in every meeting that I attend, because I can't help, I'm blushing. But yes, thank you. That was a wonderful introduction. Thank you.
No, great, Sarah. So yeah, let's without further delay, let's get started. I would love to start with personalization and customer-centric strategy. All right, we hear that in the industry, everyone talk about it. For a lot of medium to large size businesses, it means a lot because they have a lot of data to back it up. But I can imagine for startups, for small, medium businesses, while they hear in the industry about powerful personalization and the impact of that, but not having enough data about their audience would possibly create a lot of limitation. That's what I'm assuming. I could be totally wrong. I would love to hear from you. What are your views on personalization, and how do you drive customer-centric strategy for businesses you work with?
Great question. And I completely agree. I think there is so much noise and you know, there is best practice to be personalized, but when you apply that to the smaller, you know, organization who, you know, are still very much a building, or I mean, a lot of my clients, we have to go back. They haven't actually thought about how they want to segment. So that's where I think is the best way to start, to be honest, you know, for any of our viewers. My first tip before we actually talk about how to personalize, so before the how, is what exactly, you know, what is the what, how can you, you know, I guess, service, what value can you provide? How can you service that customer? Because when we start to first look at, well, it's all great to have all these data and it's great to cut it up in all different ways, but how is that meaningful for the business in order to provide the best experience, be it through service, product, for the customer? So the first thing is to sit down and go, exactly, you know, if I look at it like a database framework, how exactly do you want your database to be? What's that end goal? Is it important that you capture certain dates? You know, we're talking beyond first name right now. Okay, I think it's clear. Are there certain dates that are important that links to, you know, your service or the experience you can provide? You know, what behaviors do you want to know? What are their interests? So that's the first thing. Let's go to the what. To answer your question, then that next layer is exactly that. It'll become very clear, you know, what behaviors am I interested in? Do I want to see when they act a certain way, when they download a certain piece of content? Obviously purchase, you know, that is critical, fundamental. we want to track first purchase, third purchase, referrals. What exactly do we want to know? And what are we going to do with that? That's always the next question. What do I want to know and what am I going to do with that? Let me use a clear example. I am working with this startup, and we were designing the data architecture, exactly this. What do we want to capture? And there was so much information. And then when I said, well, what are you going to do with this? This is a premium training brand, and they had, date of birth on there. Like, is it important that we're capturing date of birth? Is it important, it might be important that we're capturing gender, but really, is our offering going to change based on date of birth, gender? We're going to target them. So, I want you to think about what are you going to do with it. Really simple wins. I recommend these behaviors, interests are really important. Whether you are B2B, B2C, like a service, or if you think of more like a retail, like a product base, understanding if someone likes, scented candles over wanting to learn content marketing is their interest, two very separate examples. Interest is a really powerful personalization indicator. And there are many, but another one which I think is really relevant for the size of businesses is locality. So again, is your business impacted by where your customers are? If again, you bring foot traffic in your locality, you might want to, you may target their people in a certain radius. We know through obviously paid digital platforms, we look at geography, locality. For some people, that can be really broad. It may not be as important. So think of things like that in terms of how you can capture, what exactly is important and how you're going to use it. You mentioned, customer-centric. I guess the other thing, Natal, it's all great. Like, you've gone to the point where you understand why, what you're going to do with it, how you're going to use it. I think the other challenge I come across is how to start using it and tools, which can feel quite limited to a small business when they're comparing themselves to bigger players, to your point. It's how, and now, what do I do with it? Like, how do I do it? So I've got a couple of pointers on that, if you'd like me to share as well.
Yeah, please do.
I think if you are someone who might feel that because of your size or budgets, you feel disadvantaged, or you're not sure what best tools. Well, the good news is in tech, I guess, there is a lot of low barriers to entry. So these days we actually have so many options, don't we? I mean, you can pick up a platform, a trial or freemium quite easily these days, and it can give you a lot of power. I guess my recommendation when we're looking at personalizing, often we use that for email, to drive email marketing strategies. In one way is an email tool. MailChimp, I am a big fan. I'm not being promoted or paid, no partner of MailChimp, but I've used it for a long time. They do have a big foothold, obviously, in the small to medium business market, and you can get a lot of value for a low cost. But I think another thing that I've really seen over the recent years is a lot of back-end CRMs, customer relationship management systems, come now out of the box with a lot of website tools. Obviously HubSpot's a really big one, but that may, they do have obviously options for startups and small businesses. But, I even have clients who use tools like Wix, and they have, decent, contacts and databases for someone to get started.
Yeah, it's very true.
Yeah. And you can do a lot with just that. So I do actually think there's a lot from a technology, but look, at the very least, I don't encourage it for other reasons around the risk, and we've got to be careful cybersecurity. But you can use Google Sheets, Excel sheets. Like, that's the reality. A lot of people do. I would definitely always recommend going with something where that data is secure, because as a business, you are responsible for that data. And like how we give our data, we want to make sure it's being taken care of. So I know I mentioned it because that's the reality of how businesses operate. They are segmenting using those things, and but just remember that we want to make sure we are doing our due diligence to care for our customers and their information. So I always recommend a more secure platform.
No, amazing, amazing. Great. That are very interesting, right? Like it also pours some insightful thoughts in my mind. You
Mm.
mentioned really good point that it's not about tools or technology, right? There are plenty of tools available uh, from freemium to a very low cost entry point perspective. But
Yes,
what is crucial, which you mentioned, is what are your views of your customer and what's your plan of leveraging personalization based on locality, based on behavior, based on interest, and as a business for you to map that with very holistic view of the business rather than just go with the flow and start capturing any details. You need to be possibly work on your data architecture in terms of what entry points you want to capture so that you can leverage it in a most effective way. Tools and technology comes at a later stage.
that's right.
I believe what I've also been observing is as much as it's important to what you capture to start with, uh, it's equally important on how you are updating those records based on the future interactions with those prospects or customer. And that's where your true potential of customer value optimization comes along, right? So very, very rightly said, it's what do you capture, look
Mm.
at your data structure, and how you're gonna keep updating that based on your interactions and touch points with the customer. That's where the bigger wins are. Tools and technology comes later.
That's right. And, to add to that, especially if this is, you're not really sure, like think big, but, within limits, like don't have everything, capture everything. Again, why? How am I going to use it? Even if you're not ready to use, that data, or when I say use that data to be able to service or send something of value based on that interest or such, it's still good to set it up from the beginning and you can work towards it. And the truth is, business is an iterative process, right? You're going to come across other opportunities you maybe didn't scope. You might refine that even further. But I think just being open-minded enough to think in that way, you're already halfway, if not more there. I cannot tell you how many, as someone who's part of my business, our consulting arm is we provide resource, we provide talent to also support our business owners. And, often they'll say, okay, yes, we're running this email campaign. Can we send it to this person based on X, Y, Z? But then we have to say, well, your data is not, we're not even capturing that to be able to target to that degree. So that's what I was alluding to. Like, so we just get out there, we start creating these huge databases, and then we expect all these things from it. But, that's not going to just happen. I want to mention something else that you triggered a thought before we kind of move on from this
Yeah.
point is, I think there was once upon a time, it's a bit like, the good old, it never gets old, the quality over quantity,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's great to go, I've got 10,000 people on my email, my database, or 10,000 followers or whatever it is. But again, but only 3,000 are engaging. I find that because we can get hung up on the numbers, it's really hard to detach ourselves and clean the database. And so to your point where you're saying continually managing, it's not a set and forget. You need to understand what you're getting, because even setting up to go, okay, these are my 5 fields I want to capture. You might start to go, well, oh, this trend or this interest area is really big. That already helps you even define maybe your marketing or business strategy. So it's okay to let go of kind of that dead weight. We always do run campaigns to remind people how great we are, to reactivate them. But remember, especially if you are investing in a tech tool and you're at that point, you're paying for that subscriber who maybe has moved on or doesn't have a need, and they'll come back if they do. But I think it's a really important point. You need to continue to look at how you're updating and cleaning your database, because you are ultimately paying for that as well. So definitely write that one down if you take away anything from this so far.
No, very true, very true, very true, Sarah. Great. Okay, let's move on. I think I always wonder that whenever we work with startups, small businesses who are in early stage of their growth journey, the biggest constraint a lot of time is the investment appetite they have, or the budgets they have to allocate towards marketing initiatives and activities. And it's always a chicken and egg situation. It's the most crucial junction they are into, where in order to scale, they need more leads, more prospects, more customers. But they are also tied on how much they can invest. And when you are in that junction, very crucial is to ensure that you are investing into the right channel, which is giving you the optimal ROI. You've been working with a lot of businesses. I would love to know your take there in terms of how do you evaluate that which channels businesses should invest, and how do you ensure that they are getting the right ROI of their investment?
Yeah. All right. Great question. There's a bit to unpack there. Well, I think, again, the first thing when choosing is you really need to understand who your customer is or customers. In marketing terms, we call them, personas, avatars, ideal client profiles in the B2B space. And because ultimately that when you have a very clear understanding who they are and how they spend their time, how they interact with content and channels, then you can have the first win, the confidence to even start to select, even if it's one channel. That's the first thing. When we really are not clear and we get caught up, I guess, in the pressure of being everywhere, let's just, throw the net wide. That's another strategy people do. But you need a lot of resource, and it's people, time, money. Okay. So the more that you can just really understand who you need to speak to and know their behaviors, to take that time up front, that's critical. That will give you the first step of the options of the channels. I think from that point, and I'm doing this right now with a startup where, a lot of money has been invested to get the company off the ground. And now we have to start to get the awareness and start to drive leads and sales. All of a sudden budgets are tight because we need to generate revenue. So in that example, we have a clear view of the channels, but there's also quite a lot in there. We just have to start somewhere. So there's an element, I think, Natal, where we just have to kind of commit to the process and to learning. Now, I always say, again, be very clear on your capacity when you make those decisions, because if you're not already feeling it, you're going to want to be everywhere, because there's a sense of, desperation is, I don't like that word. It's an ugly word, but we all kind of have that, like, we've got to get out there. We've got to start. Is this going to work? Do people want this? So there's that kind of adrenaline behind us. So it's hard to take a step back and have a breather and go, okay, instead of all 5 key top social media channels, I might just start with the one. Or Meta might go both because I can share between the two, slight changes, etc.
Yep.
So I think you just have to start. One of the methods that I recently came across, which I thought would be worth sharing, is the ICE method. It's applied to different scenarios, but in this case, impact, confidence, and ease. So if you're deciding what channel, impact, will this channel reach my ideal customer? So again, going back to how well you know them, the confidence, do I know how to use it well enough? I'm not going to lie, I'm definitely feeling my age. When TikTok came on, I felt pretty savvy. When TikTok came onto this, onto the landscape, I was like, why am I struggling to get across this? I use Instagram, but I was really struggling. So for me to adopt TikTok for my brand right now, which I'm sure there's an audience, I have low confidence. There's a big learning curve, which I don't have the time right now to take on. How confident are you in those channels or your team? And ease, can I start with low effort or cost? So again, if budgets are restricted, how easy is it for you to utilize that channel as well? So I guess that's a method I apply to looking at certain channels. What was your other question? That was kind of the first part. Go back to the second part of it.
Yes, the ROI, like.
Yeah, look, That's what I was going to say. Look, with ROI, it'd be great. I often find that my clients will say, what's going to work? And the truth is, what works for one doesn't necessarily work for the other. So the thing is to start getting a baseline, a foundational baseline of performance.
Mhm.
That's the thing in what we choose to do. It's not black and white. You have to have a learning and growth mindset and be okay with that. Be clear on what you're trying to achieve, especially if you're just starting, you have no baseline. Just be open, because you've only got upwards to grow from there. So that's for me. Give it enough time. People want to see results within days, within a week. That's not going to happen. Allow time. Plan it in your quarter. I like to plan by quarters. So I will set a goal per quarter. So it might be, if I want to try this new channel, I'm not going to just try it and go, oh, no one responded in that week. I'm going to give it the 3 months. Even after that, I'm going to look at the learnings and then improve on it. So I don't necessarily throw it to the side, but really be realistic. Things take time to learn, to cultivate. Especially if you're using it in an organic way. I think, particularly in organic, if you've got the money behind, you're probably not interested in this conversation to really aggressively, play in certain channels, but allow the time and start to create a baseline. And then, I guess, to your point around ROI, then you've got something to start judging performance, because you can start to improve performance. So if you introduce a new channel, you've got something to a bit of an expectation or a feel, but you just need to start and have a baseline.
So very interesting, right? ICE framework: impact, confidence, and ease. Very, very important. And I think I'm going to take that away. It's possibly not only to this scenario or this situation. I believe if you start looking at a lot of business decisions you make, not limited to marketing, right? Any business decision, like what impacts it's gonna bring in, all right? How confident as an entrepreneur, you knowing your business, you knowing your persona, you knowing your audience, your product or your services, how confident you are that it's gonna, any channel, any strategy, any activity you do, how confident you are. And with a lot of priorities on your plate,
Yes.
how much ease it's going to be for you to initiate or put effort into that strategy or channel. So definitely I take that away. And second point, I also really like what you mentioned. It's like I have always heard from my elders, right? If you are starting your entrepreneur journey, you need to give 1,000 days, right? Which is like 3 years before you bring or validate or prove. I know those dynamics has changed in today's world with the fast-paced environment, and startup ecosystem needs to bring MVPs much faster. So, but philosophically, the message is like you need to give decent amount of time before deriving to any decision. So I really like that, trialing anything at least for a quarter, because a lot of time what happens is we would have heard from colleagues or friends that, oh, I started that channel and it started giving me results, and that brings that creates that perceived notion that, okay, I'm going to start Google Ads and I'm going to start receiving leads in second week, or I'm going to start Meta and I'm going to start receiving leads tomorrow. Instead, there is a lot goes behind that: your messaging, your refinement of your campaign, your audience, possibly some refinement based on their post-click behavioral matrices, right?
Yes.
So unless you don't work enough on optimizing your campaign activity, maybe too early to judge in a shorter span of time. So I think, yeah, trialing any channel at least for a quarter, like 90 days, like great advice.
And I just want to add to that. I won't name the company, but I got off a call just before this with one of the biggest, social media companies in their advertising, and on behalf of my client. And I think, I sit in a privileged position. This has been my world for over 20 odd years, right? So I can look at things with a different lens. But I think as that entrepreneur, we get very, especially in the digital space, we want to, boost quick. Here's a quick injection. You don't really understand what you may be doing. You're not having the opportunity to refine your audience in the good old boost strategy. But even more is testing. Like I mentioned a few times, you have to have a learning. And I think if you're an entrepreneur, you've already kind of got this, it's in your toolkit, you have to have a learning mindset. But whenever in any channel, whether it's paid or even let's take email, I'm always looking for an opportunity to test something, even in the early days. It might be my first email. I just want to test my subject line. I want to test my opening. I want to test the color of the button. Like, let's get curious and make sure we continually at every touch point, we have an opportunity to learn something. If you're investing in paid, work with a paid specialist, work with Mavlers and the team. They will support you, or your specialist will support you in creating tests so that in the longer term, when you're given it the time, you're hitting the ground, you're able to learn. And that learning isn't just for your ads. That learning comes right back into the business. If a message is doing better, on your Facebook, then you're going to go, well, how is that message being replicated on my website, in my other toolkits? So have a testing curiosity and use every touch point. You don't have to have a lot of money to do that. And in pretty much most platforms these days, if not all the ones I'm interacting with, they now offer easy, you might see it as split testing or easy ways to test your marketing activity. So definitely test when you're exploring channels.
Very true, very true. We often suggest customers to, even if they have whatever amount of pie of investment they want to put towards marketing, we always suggest at least 5 to 10% of that budget, of that equation, to always allow for trialing, testing, experimenting things, because that always helps you to kind of explore new avenues. And like you correctly mentioned, it's not always about getting ROI of this channel. Maybe these tests brings a lot of intel about your customers, and you can roll it out across many other channels for overall brand positioning and messaging.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, great. Okay, Sarah, moving on, especially thinking about content strategies, lead generation. Any tips, suggestions on how a small business can turn one bigger piece of content into multiple assets? Could you walk us through about if you have done it, if there are any advice or suggestions on how reproduction or repurpose of the existing content for multiple platform, multiple channel without investing too much? Again, all these suggestions we seek from you because you work with those businesses who wants to make most out of whatever investment they put forward.
Yeah, I love this question. I'm very passionate about this because one thing that I'm stand by 110 more percent, content marketing to me is the lifeblood now of marketing. Now, it's not just about what posts you're going to put up. Content literally powers so many different machines in your marketing strategy, from what you're going to email out, what you're going to post, what your webinar might be about, even just commenting on peers in your area, that's content, So I think even when I work with, as I've mentioned, Natal, like service-based businesses, I've worked with SaaS. I ran a Australia New Zealand team many years ago. Like these days, even if you're selling products at the local store, you still have a presence and you're generating content. Whether it's look at the latest products, look at me, we're unstacking, even the user generated, that's all content. So that's the first thing. To your question, how can a small business utilize content but leverage it? Okay, so we're on the premise that time is tight. How do we be more efficient and effective? Well, I am also, I myself in my own business, I just use, I repurpose my content. I'm getting better at batching, so I'll touch on two things, batching and repurposing. I am a little bit guilty, and I'm lucky I have someone in my team who gives me a good nudge when I have to generate my thought leadership content. But I think, again, it comes down to if you can create some good processes, habits, and you've got the systems, content can become very quick and easy. So batch your time. I always say to my clients where we run their content marketing is even if it's, take a day to do all your content. For some, they like to spread that out. So batch your time. Listen. If you go, well, I don't know what I should even talk about. Well, just think of the conversation we're having right now. Not only is this content for someone else, but it helps us. We're exchanging insights and learnings that help generate content ideas. So if you're really sitting there with the pressure of just creating content, remove that pressure and just write down anything that came up in your last few meetings. And I'm telling you now, it's going to start to flow. So that's the first thing. But getting to the crux of it, the most easiest strategy that I live by, that I implement for my clients, is start with one piece of content. And look, this isn't rocket science. It's not new. I'm not the first one to say this, but it really does work. I always start with a long form blog. So all I need to do every month, look, I do have someone that helps me. I'm not going to lie. So it's not all I need to do, but this is what is the seed. Every month, I focus on a topic for my audience I know is valuable because, I've captured this data, and I create a long form blog, an article. From there, we create carousels, we create little snippets of stories. I can even use them as a step-by-step guide. So I like to create in my blogs. I like to be really step-by-step layman's terms. So that's easy for me to then go, oh, maybe here's a checklist, or, here's now a guide that you can download. Hashtag lead generator. One thing I'm much better at, I'm getting better at now, and I've kind of hidden it, but I actually have a whole recording area set up here. So now I use AI tools to support me. I take my article that I've written and I say, break this down into 60 to 90 second reel scripts. So now I'm actually recording that. It's important because I'm selling my expertise, my trust. So for me, I need to be the face of that brand at the moment. So that may not be a script for you. It might be break this down into 5 posts, etc. So that's a really easy one. I want to use another example because a blog is a very easy example, if I may. I have a client who we invested heavily in running monthly webinars. Okay, so only the time to invest in generating the topic, creating the scripts, creating the presentations, turning up, delivering. How can we do that better? That one-off shot, yeah, you might have a registered person. Half of them may not turn up. They'll wait for a recording. Okay, you've got an on-demand. Now, and you guys do this well, breaking that up into smaller snippets. And those snippets don't need to just be used like video snippets, not just, to put on your socials. I'd be using those snippets even in emails, in my FAQs. Like why, if someone's got a question, here's a video. Utilize how else, I guess that's the next thing. Not only how many ways can you change the format or utilize it for different formats, but where can you deliver it? So that webinar goes from a one-off webinar to now, maybe 8 different snippet recordings that are also now embedded in my platform. When people purchase my coaching, they also get an additional resource, or I've used it as my newsletter, bite size for the week, and I can go on and on, right? So just see what you're already doing. So I guess the takeaway is, what are you already doing, or what can you do? ICE method. And then write down, and I'm more than happy to share with your community. I have a snippet of all the different formats of content you can make. Whether you're a cloud person or a list person, write down all the different other pieces of content or formats you can create from that one. Okay, and then you can very quickly see you've got a lot of options there. And again, I just want to, you might go, well, that's all great, but I don't have the time. Well, we don't have as much of that excuse to lean on, because even in Canva these days, if you're using a tool like that, through their AI, they can create these templates very quickly for you, So that's the final hurdle, really. It's just getting you to have a think and just commit. Again, the timing, commit. For me, I've solely driven any of my content through my social, and so I really focus heavily on Instagram. I'm not in a million places. I've recently introduced a LinkedIn newsletter because I thought I'm putting in all this effort to write a blog. I'm just going to change the tone because it's more personal. It's the same core message. Change the tone to meet the platform. That's the key thing. And now I have a LinkedIn newsletter because the truth is there are people who are going to sign up to my newsletter who will want to consume it in that format, but there are others who want to consume it through their existing behavior on LinkedIn and vice versa. So I'm not reinventing the wheel, I'm not creating something separate. I'm just utilizing that. LinkedIn is going to send a notification. It's going to send them an email. It's doing the heavy lifting, right? In that example. So think about your capacity, what you can do, and how you can leverage that. Start small, just start. Hopefully that has that answered your question.
Oh, no, very true, very amazing. So
about it, but yes.
Yeah, I think sometimes you don't realize, but businesses, when they hear, they feel like, oh, I'm doing a bit of it, and that's just encourage them to do more often. So at Mavlers also, what we do it is we have become very active on noticing our interactions with the customers, right?
Yes.
Our interactions with our prospects, with our existing customers, and what sort of queries they come with, what sort of questions they ask for, what sort of information we need to provide them, and kind of those old school things like you derive those FAQs. Now, as simple as that, as soon as you start thinking about those questions, those interactions with your customer, and you start you'll start having all these ideation of the topics you should cover, and amazing insights on just tweaking the messaging based on the platform tonality and the audience expectation and multiple formats. The LinkedIn newsletter is a great suggestion. I think, yeah, why you shouldn't do it as a business, because you are doing that newsletter on your platform to your subscribers already. Why don't you want to offer that to your audience on LinkedIn?
I want to just quickly jump in there because it's actually a peer in my industry who we are competitors in many ways, but we've spoken. We're going to do a podcast because I really admire what she's doing. You can always learn. You have to, again, got to learn even from your peers. I think one of the biggest concerns that some of my clients have is like, oh, but we've already posted that, or we've already emailed this or that. Oh no, someone's going to see it twice. Good. They need to see it 7+ times. What are we up to now? I mean, and so it holds us back from reusing or, even reposting something again. Like if you're stuck, go back to your last content. We have a client that when we start to drive because we need his input, we go back and we repost things and we tweak it a bit. And 6 months ago, I guarantee you, even if the same person is seeing it, they're not going to remember. But the same person's not. And one thing on this individual, which I really took a lot of inspiration, is she does her article. She'll even email you and she'll put it on other channels, LinkedIn. And again, I can open her email, read the same thing as if I go somewhere else. I'm not annoyed by that because sometimes I only get to my email because that's in front of me every day. I miss it in other channels. So don't let the worry of someone seeing you do something more than once looks bad. In fact, you need that for you to become front of mind. And I guess when you start to get to the point, which I'm sure you will start to overflow and feel very inspired with all the content you create, just make sure to use the ICE method, put a bit of restraint, not to hold you back, but we don't want it to tip into overwhelm. And that's the killer at the end of the day, not the ability to do the overwhelm. So that's my only little point, that apply the restraint as well.
Yep. Okay, very quickly, the last one that would love to know, what are your opinion on outsourcing versus in-house and finding that right balance? Everyone outsources these days to make most out of their investment resources. Outsourcing not necessarily always mean offshoring. Even brands needs to outsource their activities to the experts. And what are your takes on especially small, medium businesses? What is that tipping point when they should outsource, when they should keep things in-house?
Yeah.
What activities they can outsource, what activities they should be keeping it in-house from the brand perspective?
Great question. I think it's important to note, my career, when you go into marketing, you can pretty much go work in an agency or you can work what we call in-house, okay? So, or client side. So I've worked client side, my entire career, minus a 6-month stint, where I thought, because, you grow up and you look at, I want to work in a big ad agency, and, and I found for me, the client side environment suited me. And in my corporate career working, I've always worked in companies where, in fact, most of them built in-house teams. So even for me, my only interaction outsourcing were at times with sometimes creative agencies, PR agencies, so certain specific capabilities. But I've really evolved and changed my thinking about that as well, being more open-minded. I think there is a place for both, but there are common threads. So I think the first thing is, look, I'm not going to lie, I provide an outsourced service for an in-house field. So, because I know the nuances of an in-house team, but I provide an outsourced model. So you might think I'm biased, but I'm really not, because what it is I'm going to say is, whether you choose to go in-house or outsource, they have to have a common thread. And that's the feeling of being embedded in your business. Okay. So for me, and that's why, and again, this is not a pre-planned plug, but why I love working with Mavlers and the team who work with me is, I know that my team, even though they're outsourced from my business, you are invested in the success of my business and my clients. So, so at the same that you would expect from an employee in your team, there's got to be a level of that person being really invested. Okay. The relationship, that's basically what, that relationship that it comes down to as well. So I think if you do decide to outsource functions, and I'll get to filling gaps in a moment, make sure you feel that they are part of your team, like they're part of your in-house team. Okay. I think that's really important, because that's where it's those nuances. And that's why in business, things come up, opportunities present, you need to be able to react quickly. And I think if you have a good partner, whether they're sitting somewhere else and under a different brand name, but who can, be agile and nimble with you, and understand and be invested in your business, look for opportunities and bring them to the table, that's going to be a very successful relationship. Okay. Look, for me, I think the reality is, for the type of size business that we're talking about, building an in-house team is challenging. Now, it depends where you sit in the world. I'm in Sydney, Australia. The fact is, I want to support my economy, but salaries are high. As a small business owner, I don't have necessarily the luxury to have a full in-house team. I actually have a mix. I have offshore, local, and depends on the need. So these are the gaps thing that I want to lead to. So, but the real main driver for me and clients who start to talk to me about outsourcing is, again, where are the gaps? But also it does come down to money as well, like budget, financial. That's the truth. Okay, so that might itself limit you. Now, if it doesn't limit you, then I would also suggest you got to look talent all over the world. Okay. And I think it took me a long time to even though I knew it, it's like you kind of get siloed into knowing your market, the people you work with, and you forget that talent exists all over the world. And in the case of Australia, we are very small. So think about the talent. So again, you can hire them directly or in an outsourced capacity. Go think about where the expertise gaps are. Okay, even for me, I know, Natal, like it's easy for me to say keep strategy in-house, and that can work really well because they're exposed on the day-to-day to other aspects of the business. But also a strategic head is also very costly. So people hire me to be that strategy head. I'm outsourced. Do you know what I mean? So it's how you embed that outsourced person in the business. What's the skill you're trying to fill, and can you afford to fill it directly or not? And then look at the best talent options that are available within your means. Okay. So for me, it's also, I think, the critical part that I will add. I'm sorry, I've talked in circles, but here's a critical part for me. If I put on my hat right now, one of the core differences, aside from money, etc., forget all that, is do you want to people manage? Okay, because when you hire in-house, you are responsible for that person, how they're feeling, how they're settling, how they're performing, their needs. It's not just about performance, you know, their psychosocial safety, their onboarding, etc., their tools they need. Whereas if you think, I don't really want to carry the weight of having to people manage someone, then likely an outsource is the best solution, because it's your provider who carries that weight for their people. At the end of the day, when I work with Mavlers, I don't have to worry about the performance of those team members. I have my account manager who takes that on, right? So, and they all perform great, by the way. But, you know, that I think if it comes down to anything else as well is, you know, do I want to people manage that person? Because you might go, I've got the skill gap and I'll bring them in, but do I really want to carry on that responsibility? But then also learning to manage their needs, you know. So I think that's probably the one thing that's overlooked, because we tend to be driven by finances. But do you want to take that on? Because it is a big part of your time. And you might love people. I love people, okay? But I got very burnt out when I managed a lot of people. And that's the last thing I want to do. Now I've rebuilt a team. I'm re-energized. But, you know, it takes a lot. You have to be really committed to taking on that responsibility. Yeah. I hope that helps. It's not a one against any. I think it just comes down to what you really need.
No, very true, very true. And I think for especially startups and small, medium businesses, like you mentioned, where they should be investing their time the most.
Yes.
Okay, they want to invest their time in kind of building that team, managing those people, versus many different hats they wear day to day. And if they are at a junction where it is outsourceable, if they can manage to find amazing or better talent locally or elsewhere, take away the hassle of managing, and if they can expect them to be integral part, invested into their brand and their growth journey, why to sign up for all those hassles while you can get the similar level of commitment? There will be always differences, but is that difference you are ready to trade off in the phase of the business you are right now today?
And I just want to say, you've inspired a thought that I should have mentioned. A couple of things. I think, like, even with certain areas of expertise in the marketing space, like, I choose not to bring certain things in-house because I don't want to carry even the additional cost of subscriptions for platforms. And, you know, so there is that money side of thing. But also, I think you touched on something that triggered this thought. And I've done it myself. When you're starting out or very new, early, you may not know what the best dynamic is. So an outsourcing model is great to test, like, do I need that type of person? How often do I need them? Is this the best fit? And then later you might say, I want to bring that in-house, or your partner, which I know the Mavlers you support in also helping bring talent internally. It doesn't have to be this or that, but it could be a really great testing and starting ground to know what's the best fit for the needs, because it is going to change your needs and evolve. So it's a really kind of safe way to test different kind of dynamics and teams, roles, people, etc.
Yeah, no, very true, very true. Great, Sarah. Amazing to have you today. Really appreciate all your time and amazing insights. I think all your responses, there's a huge depth of reflection of you working with small, medium businesses, helping them to grow, knowing that persona really well, knowing their pain, and the solutions and support you have been offering over all these years. So great to have you. And I'm sure the audience gonna take a lot of tips and tricks out of this to implement in their day-to-day businesses.
Wonderful. I hope so. And thank you again for having me. And you're always here to help share.
Yeah,
so great. Thanks again for your time.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. Take a lot of tips and tricks out of this to implement in their day-to-day businesses.
Wonderful. I hope so. And thank you again for having me. And you're always here to help share.
Yeah,
so great. Thanks again for your time.
Thanks a lot, Sarah.